Sorry. That you can use to refer to. That link will provide the information that you can have access that our folks at the Small Business Development Center will be covering today. Now, before we get started, I wanted to note that in order to keep the webinar flowing and stay within our 1 hour goal, we have muted everyone. However, we want to hear from you and ask that if you have a question, to please post those questions in the Q&A section, and we will address those at the end of the presentation. Again, thanks for joining us, and I will now turn the program over to my co-host, Mandy Archer with the Blue Ridge Crossroads Small Business Development Center, who will introduce her colleagues and will moderate this afternoon's session.
Thanks, Sandy, and yes, good afternoon to everyone. Oh, you gonna let me share, Sandy? I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen before we get started, if that's okay, and you all can let me know if some of my fellow presenters will let me know when I've got this in the correct mode, right? And I think I need to switch that, right, Sandy?
Yes, to presentation.
All right. Are we good to go now? Technology, right?
You're great.
Okay, so good afternoon again, and again, welcome to our introduction seminar on building a resiliency plan for your business. The staff with Southwest Virginia Small Business Development Centers will be delivering the information today. Again, my name is Mandy Archer. I've got a printer that started going. If y'all hear that, I apologize, but my name is Mandy Archer. I'm director for the Blue Ridge Crossroads SBDC in Galax. I serve the city of Galax and the counties of Carroll, Grace, and Galax with and Bland. I'm going to go ahead and do introductions for my fellow presenters, and we're just going to hopefully pick it up as we're going through the presentation. Also have Cindy Fields on the line with us. She is director for the Virginia Highlands Community College Small Business Development Center located in Abingdon, and she's serving the city of Bristol, town of Abingdon, Washington, and Smith counties. And also joining us is Margie Douglas, director for the SBDC at Southwest Virginia Community College. Margie serves the counties of Buchanan, Dickinson, Tazewell, and parts of Russell. So one of the things, our goals today are essentially to share with you what a resiliency plan is, why it's important, and introduce you to the first few steps of developing that plan, okay? In the following weeks, as we stated, you will get more detailed information about various sections of a resiliency plan that you are creating, which we are providing links at the end of this and in that seminar on templates. We encourage you to attend each week or access these recordings following the session in order to develop your plan. So let's talk for just a second about what is resiliency. Well, of course, the definition that we have written down here is the creation and execution of a proactive plan to help mitigate loss of cash flow during business interruption and enabling the business to continue. So let's think about that in terms of maybe a few examples. Kind of easy to think of them right now at this point, retail store that was mandated to close, adjust to online marketing to increase online sales due to social distancing requirements and closure requirements. Another example is cross-training employees for various business functions. So we're trying to just show you these simple examples at the beginning to help get a grasp on what the process that we're trying to tell you to go through or the process that we're trying to show you. Before we get started, I do want to share just a few terms with you. I think that's important for you all to understand when you're going through that planning process is we're referring to this as business resiliency plan. To be quite honest, is also referred to as a business continuation plan. And in short term, keep your business running and limit the financial impact on your business. So when we make those terms and continue to talk through the process, we may use the term resiliency, we may use the term continuation. Just keep in mind we're working on one document. Part of that is also emergency procedures and responses. And so the emergency procedures and response is really assessing your different risks and determining what steps you will need to take in response to those potential threats. And later, we're going to talk about potential threats that your business may encounter. And then obviously, emergency communication plan. You can develop everything, but unless you have developed the mode of communication in which you're going to disperse that to your staff, resources, and customers, then you're still at a standstill. So we want to make sure that you have all of those processes in place when you're developing this. In addition, so many businesses create a business plan when you're going into business or expanding it. We want you all to think of a business resiliency plan, or again, continuation plan, as something you create when you're already in business and is going to help minimize disruptions and keep your business moving forward. So here on this slide, you should be able to see a cycle of continuity is ongoing. It's not stagnant. So once you start, it's always going to be in a continual process. It does have to be updated, maintained, and practiced. So let's kind of go back to that example that you cross-train employees for an issue that you may encounter. Well, if you cross-train employees to handle a task, but all of those other cross-trained employees have left, and in your business continuation plan, they're still listed as the individuals, you need to have adapted that and updated it. So we want to just make sure that you put yourself, and we'll talk about that in the upcoming weeks as well, is there a schedule? Is there, what other information or what things do you may need to look at on a more continual basis to update it? So the first step, and again, we're actually not going to go into every one of these steps in detail because in the upcoming weeks, that's the information you're going to learn about. We want to introduce you to it. So you have to think about developing your plan in the terms of prevention. So you have to essentially look at a risk management plan. You may have done this with a business plan. You may have established, some risks that were associated, but there are much more associated with the businesses. And so this is more detailed, more in depth, and also those responses associated with it. We also want to make sure that you start looking at preparedness. What is the impact that risk could have on my business if for some reason it does happen? So the business impact analysis is going to be part of that. The response, we talked about the emergency preparedness response, incident response plans. And then recovery. What is your next steps? How do you get going when something does happen? It's very hard, I think, in the moment to say, well, we're going to be to make those decisions. And so you want to take a look at what decisions can you make, or what decisions did you already make? And hopefully they would be able to work for the business moving forward. It may seem weird to include your general business goals in a business continuation plan, but if you don't keep those goals at the forefront of your plan, then you can easily get off track. So you want to make sure that you're updating some general business goals as they change. That when you update your business goals, you're ensuring that each step of your continuation plan supports these goals. So here we provided a few examples. So maybe my business goal for my boutique store is that I do want to provide customers the opportunity to purchase items through online platforms. I'm a brick and mortar. I've typically only done in person, but I've started to think about this. And this is prior to any pandemic or any interruption that you may have encountered. So that's a goal that I have. Maybe I need to start writing a resiliency plan and just keep that as, well, if this is my goal, you want to make sure that whatever you're writing in that resiliency plan and tasks and impacts will support that goal. Another thing may be for a manufacturer, if you want to expand manufacturing operations by buying new new machines, new software, new computers. If you're looking to expand, an interruption or a hazard in service could halt that goal immediately. And so thinking about your resiliency in terms of what's my next goal for my business, you can continue to write that resiliency plan with those things in mind. So one of the first things that you will be doing is you need to identify the critical functions that keep your business operational. Now, one thing I'm going to say is I did not necessarily put people on here, and I'm hoping the next slide will explain that a little bit. But we all know that people and customers are critical functions to our business. So let's talk about that in just a minute. But the critical function of most businesses is to sell your products and services. You need to get those in the hands of the consumers. Delivery, the process of getting it to them. So maybe the restaurant, your product is given to them because they come in and sit down at your restaurant, or maybe it's a delivery service. You have irreplaceable assets, you have equipment, you have inventory that if something happens to them in a very quick manner, it can be devastating to your business. The process of manufacturing products, so the production is what we're kind of talking about there. So there's a production process. That's a critical function. And if there is a downtime in a line, if there's a person missing that performs a critical function in that assembly process, and you don't have anyone else to take their place, that can be a critical function that becomes disrupted. And we all know, businesses operate off of money. So accepting payments and managing cash flow are definitely critical functions associated with your business as well. There could be more. This is just a list. This is an overarching example of the types of things to think about when you're looking at that critical function. So the reason I kind of said, let's wait a minute on the employees of them being a critical function is because you have to think about what resources you need that allow your critical function to operate. So again, we're going to go back to a manufacturing operation as an example. So the critical business is the machinery. The asset is the machinery for manufacturing. Well, you have to have resources to operate that machinery. You have employees, you have electricity, and maybe in this case, you also have an internet connection, not for the machine itself, but because that's how the company receives orders. They receive all their orders online. So that next column, you can see it's a function of the resource. So the employee has specialized training to use that particular machine. The electricity obviously allows you to run the machine. And then also, again, like I said, the internet connection allows processing of orders. So it tells you how much production needs to take place. So going forward, if something were to happen to one of those resources and how it functions, what are you going to do if it becomes disrupted? And that's one of the processes in thinking about this resiliency plan. Is it's not just about the hazards and the impacts of disasters. It's also day-to-day operations. And how do you handle those if there is a slight disruption, such as electricity goes out? So maybe we have a backup generator because we can still function, or we have to function at a lower capacity because a generator could not operate a manufacturing facility at full capacity. So maybe you also need to identify which functions will you still keep in operation when on a backup generator. Making sure you have additional employees trained in case that employee that has specialized training is sick or leaves or any other number of things. And then maybe for the processing of orders, your internet's gone out because a line's been cut down the street. We know that happens to all of us, and it's almost, I think I probably lose my mind when my internet goes out because I don't know how to function. What are my backup sources? Maybe I can work from home because my internet works from there, and I can still receive the orders and then write those up and hand deliver that to a machinist. So that is just ideas. And then down at the bottom of this slide, we showed you examples of what supporting resources are and maybe what backup resources you need to think about. So that was the mindset in developing this slide. This is kind of interesting, when I'm showing you a second example of a retail boutique store. So a machine, we always think that manufacturers and small mom and pops, yes, they do face significant differences in their operations. There are a lot of things that, as far as critical operations, are very similar. So that's what we wanted to kind of show you on a particular slide. Is we need 3 supporting resources, but the critical business function as a point of sale system, specifically when the power goes out in the building, it has to be reset. It's just the way it operates, and it has to be manually reset. So maybe you have an employee that knows how to do that. It's probably wise to make sure either most or more than one employee knows how to reset the system in case the owner or manager is not there. An alternative resource may be that you use an online support system to reset it. Whoever the seller of the point of sale system might be, could have some type of hotline that helps you walk through the process. Again, electricity to operate it. It helps you, but electricity goes out, then you need to reset the power. What if someone doesn't know how to do, or the electricity is out? You might want to consider what are all sources of payments. I know that there are some machines that they don't even open if they don't have electricity. And so are you able to even open your cash register to continue to process cash payments if you don't have access to credit card machine or other things? So think about what process may happen if it is a long-term electrical outage. However, you can still make sales. And again, think about that in terms of your internet connection, which is typically needed for credit card sales, to make sure you understand what happens if for some reason your internet connection goes out. I think Square systems and things like that may actually process offline and then batch everything at a later time. So as the business owner, you want to make sure you understand what is going to happen so that you do capture those payments when you are able to. So going forward, we've talked about the critical business operations. Again, I want to remind you, we're kind of doing this bird's eye view of the information that you need to think about when developing this. And so again, not major detail, but moving on to what can be that interruption. Okay. Obviously disasters can happen. Hazards within your store, making sure that you that things are secure, that you don't that mopping and then you put signs down. Lots of various things like that just within your store. And then, of course, disasters that maybe you have no control over. Cyber, major issue now for pretty much every small business there is, due to the fact that we are collecting personal data based off of credit card sales and email lists and other things. So making sure that you have a plan for cyber if that were to be hacked in any way. Key employees. Maybe a key employee is unable to work for various reasons. Don't forget about your supply chain. It could be that you are in smooth operations. However, you receive your products and services from North Carolina, who, of course, just did experience a tropical storm and up the coast. And maybe that business had to close for a few days or a week or more. And so it could be interruption to your supply chain. And then also, obviously, closures. There could be events that close down streets, but there could also be construction, which is helpful to your business in the end of the process. However, it is an interruption during the process because you have to make sure that you have safe ways for individuals to come in to your business and shop, or alternative matters. So again, this is just, we identified your goals, your key business functions, and your resources for those functions. And so after you do that, then you do have to speculate on what potential interruptions to delivering those business functions will be. And then this is kind of the downer part of it, but we want to make sure that you understand the importance of thinking about this as part of your normal day-to-day business. Is based on some statistics we have, how many businesses do not reopen after a major disaster. The Institute for Business and Home Safety speculates that 25% of businesses do not reopen after a major disaster. FEMA actually puts that figure closer to 40%. It does not specify, the statistics we have don't specify if it's smaller versus larger type businesses. So keep in mind that any of these hazards, interruptions could, of course, devastate your business in some way, which is why we are trying to share with you the resources for you to develop your own plan. So I am going to stop now. I'm going to turn the next few slides over to my colleague, Cindy Fields.
You're muted.
That helps. Thank you, Mandy. So we're going to jump in and talk about, kind of what the first step is when you think about having some sort of a disaster that could cause interruption to your business. One of the first things that you want to think about, and now, during this pandemic, we're now thinking about, what if there's a second shutdown? How do we prevent and lessen the impact to our business? And so part of that is the risk management plan, which again, as Mandy has said, there's going to be a lot more detail along the way as you follow on through these sessions. But you want to identify the areas of risk. That's kind of your first step in creating your resiliency plan. Next slide. So what are some of the examples of hazards? Obviously, I don't think that if we gave you all an assignment, 7 months ago and said, list some of the hazards that you can think of that would interrupt your business, none of us at that point could have imagined that we would be walking around en masse, businesses closed down, and feeling like that we were in some sort of science fiction movie. But some of the examples, that you want to think about are fires. Obviously that is something that is possible. If you're in a business or in an area where maybe there's a forest around you, or maybe you're near a national forest, or an area, around some sort of a park. A wildfire, that could be some sort of example. So there's lots of natural type disasters. There are other things like Mandy mentioned a power outage, landslides, debris flow, hurricanes, thunderstorms. And then there are things like medical emergencies. If you are in a business and you have a colleague that maybe something happens to them within a plant, they're using a piece of equipment, and something happens we used to own a convenience store in Delhi, and we had an employee who was slicing meat one time and got her hand caught in the meat slicer. That was an urgent situation where, we had to keep serving customers, but it was an emergency situation that had to be dealt with very quickly, in a lot of different aspects. So what about a loss of a key employee? That's, again, something that you don't always think about as causing a big interruption, particularly in your small businesses who have one to run everything and they have all the knowledge about your business. What happens if suddenly one of them develops COVID and they end up on a ventilator? To maintain that business operating, somebody else needs to be able to step up and keep things operating. We've talked about different things. We've talked about the pandemic, supply chain issues. We've also seen that, particularly if you have been in a food service type business, you've seen disruptions in the supply chain, which can definitely add to the issues that we've already dealt with throughout this pandemic. So these are just, it's a sampling of a lot of the different types of hazards that could cause interruption to your business. And you really want to think through these as you are looking at the risk and developing a what-if plan for this resiliency plan. Next slide. So identifying supplier risk. So one thing that we definitely have seen throughout this, as I mentioned, if you have been in the food service business in any way, it could be grocery store, it could have been that you had a catering business, or that you actually had a restaurant. One thing that our owners have found is that not only were they told they couldn't open their businesses to have customers come in and sit down and purchase food and consume it in their business, but they pivoted and said, okay, we'll do takeout. And many have done extremely well with that. But one of the problems that they encountered was that very quickly that supply chain was shrinking. And so many times, and in our own situation, you had those suppliers which were your favorite suppliers. You did most of your business with them. You had a great relationship with them. But it's always important to know who the other players are and to maintain some sort of relationship with them. Because what I think our food service businesses found was that while they might have gone to PFG and ordered, they could get 2 boxes of chicken from them, which maybe they went through in a day's time. And maybe chicken was one of their biggest sellers on their menu. Then they needed to be able to go to several other suppliers and try to purchase some additional produce or chicken from them in addition to that. So looking at a lot of different supply options and knowing who those are, knowing that you have a relationship there and that if you call them, they're going to answer you, that's very important. Now, what we've obviously seen is with this pandemic is that the things that affected us as a business owner, were also affecting the supply chains as well. So sometimes what has happened, especially in the food service business, is that people begin to look at what does their local supply look like. So, maybe that there is a poultry farmer in the area that sells at a farmer's market, or I can get some things from. Maybe there's a local produce owner that I can contract with. So I think we've seen a shift, in this situation back to, let's focus on local and make sure that we all can sustain one another. So, this really is about looking at your options in your suppliers and considering that as part of this resiliency plan. So the next step then is going to be preparing. After you've determined what the risks are, then how do we figure out what the areas of loss are going to be, what we might experience, and how do we lessen the impact that this hazard could have on our business? So what are the different areas that may impact our business? Lost sales, income. I know somebody in the registration list said that one of the reasons they had decided to participate in this series was because they wanted to stop losing employees. So, that is another piece of an issue that you need to consider, during this is, if you do have a shutdown for some reason, how do you maintain those employees to make sure that when you open back up that you're completely ready and you have those employees who are ready to assist you with your business? Regulatory fines. If you have ever been in a business where you have had to deal with EPA, that those can be very serious. They can shut your business down if there's some sort of an EPA issue, and you can also be impacted by fines that are pretty hefty. So, early on, you need to think about maybe setting up some sort of a fund where you have some cash available that can be there and available to pay those fines in the event that you ever had one. Increased expenses that you may not have thought that you were going to have. And I'm going to offer some examples here in a few minutes as we talk about some of these. But customer dissatisfaction is another thing that can happen, when you shut down your business. For local restaurants, you saw them paring down their menus. Even national chains like Cracker Barrel were paring down their menus. Well, customers didn't like that because I go and I order, the same sandwich every time I go to Cracker Barrel, and why don't you have my sandwich? It may have been that, there was something, a side item that they couldn't offer. Loss of data, that's another thing that's really critical as you look at these resiliency plans. Downtime, damage to buildings, machinery, or inventory. So, next slide. And so as you look at these hazards, you're identifying really the probability that different hazards could happen, and then trying to assess, well, if it did happen, what would the magnitude be? And the next step then is identifying all the assets that could be at risk, and then how is that, again, going to impact my business? So I'm going to give you an example of a business client that I work with. They have been in business over 30 years. About 20 years of that, they have been in one building. This building sits on a piece of flat land beside a heavily trafficked highway, a 2-lane highway. And to the rear of that building, there is a residential home. There is a landscaped bank that is probably about 3 foot high behind their building. There is probably about 6 feet offset between that bank and their building, and all around their building is paved. So, they had never had really a lot of issues in that building, hazards that they had to try to think about or mitigate. But about a year ago, they came in one Monday morning, walked back to their stock room where a lot of their inventory was stored. They also had customer orders that had already been packaged and were ready for delivery. They are a promotional business. They deal in apparel and lots of different things. But they had packaged those customer orders in large cardboard boxes, and they were sitting on the floor on shelves. So they came in and they walked back to the back of that building to find water everywhere. There had been a very heavy rainstorm where it was just a downpour that happened over the course of about an hour, and then that was it. It was over with. But that water had flooded the inventory room. It had then run into their showroom, was under their carpet, So all of a sudden they found themselves in a predicament because they had customer orders that were ruined. So they had to call those customers. So now you're talking about the asset that was at risk was the reputation of confidence in them as a business. Because these were custom orders, so it wasn't like they could just turn around and have that same product for those customers the next day. They had equipment that obviously was damaged. Then they had just the headaches of the fact that they had all this water that had set all weekend underneath all this carpet, so that all the carpet had to be ripped up and replaced. And you have all the issues of black mold that can start, and trying to dry out sheetrock and that type of thing. So, I tell you this to help you understand that lots of times we're not necessarily talking about the type of assets that are going to be on your balance sheet, but we're talking about assets in terms of things that are really important and valuable to your business operation. So, we're talking about people, obviously. We're talking about property, equipment. It could be your supply chain. We've talked a little bit about that already. Systems and equipment. Just being able to stay open and continue operating. Data, had there been a computer mainframe or some sort of system in that back room, it would have destroyed that system and they could have lost a lot of customer data. We talked about reputation and confidence, environment. So, as you look at that, they had to think about, well, what kind of impacts is this going to have on us? Obviously they had to be shut down, for about a week. And then business was being interrupted, after that, just with construction issues, laying of new carpet, that type of thing. They obviously had to call all these customers and explain to them what had happened. So there was going to be some financial loss, with that. They looked at obviously giving those customers a discount. So that's going to impact them at the end of the year on their bottom line. If it's something related to, like we said, EPA, you could be looking at fines or penalties. If it had been a situation where you had an employee that was injured, you could then be looking at a lawsuit. You could be looking at, an increase in your unemployment insurance rates that you're paying. So all of these are things that you really have to consider as you look at all of these different types of hazards. And let's move on to the next slide, and I'll continue on with this discussion. So your initial response there is, I've got to have some sort of a plan in place, obviously, and that's why we're doing this entire series. You want to think about that when catastrophes occur, how are we going to quickly recover from that? So really you have to think about, okay, what staff do I have? Putting the staff together in teams so that everybody knows what to do and people aren't, just kind of running in circles and bumping into one another. And focus your efforts on getting things restored, getting it cleaned up. You want to make sure you're providing that communication to your employees. You may be in a business where you need to reach out to the community and you need to let them know what has happened, so that they're understanding and they're still supporting your business. You may want to talk to your bank, if it's a situation that's going to require that you have some flexibility, maybe with some sort of a mortgage payment or business loan. You have to have some flexibility built into that resiliency plan. Managing your cash flows. This is one thing I think that we have definitely dealt with as we have helped businesses navigate through this pandemic. And, it hit so quickly that people really did not have much of a chance to even prepare for what was coming. Again, we had no idea. Things were really normal. Things were going great, in February, 1st of March, and all of a sudden, wow, here we go. So that's been something that has been a very big challenge for a lot of small business owners. I'm sure it has been for a number of you that are on here as well. And I do believe that going forward, that people are going to try to look at establishing those accounts, whether it be a savings account or some sort of a business emergency fund, so that they've got some savings in place to carry them and employees in the event that something happens again. Again, one of the things that I think has helped some of the businesses is that, we said early on, if you've got a mortgage to pay or a business loan, reach out quickly to your lenders. Go talk to them and see how they'll work with you. And by and large, I think most of what we saw was that, lenders were willing to work with their customers. You may want to reach out to your vendors to see, what types of terms that they could extend to you in the event of an emergency situation. We have seen, deferments on loans and on rent payments. We've also seen utility companies who have been very flexible with businesses about paying for utility costs. But these are things that you need to think about, have those discussions and have that built into your plan. And that all can help you know what your expenses still would be in the event that you're shut down. I'm sure you're very aware of that right now. Understanding, what your financial statements will tell you. And I will tell you that, as the SBDCs have received more funds through the CARES Act, that across the state, two things that I know we're all focusing on are helping businesses with additional marketing and helping businesses with understanding their financials and financial literacy education. So definitely reach out to your SBDCs to help you with that. Communicating with your suppliers on any kind of extended terms that you may need. Lowering your inventory cycles. Decreasing your accounts receivable. So in other words, go look at what your accounts receivable are. If you have companies and customers that you're dealing with and, their receivables are 60 days, try to figure out how you can incentivize them to start paying those receivables quicker. It may mean that you offer them a bit of a discount up front, but in the long run, I think that's going to help you out, and they're going to get on that cycle of paying you quicker, which is going to provide you with a quicker cash flow. Finding alternative markets also for your products and services. That's another thing that, we've really seen, and I know that we'll be talking about more, is as we have dealt with businesses who suddenly said, I have all of these expenses that I have to pay, but, the government has shut our business down. So what do I do? Like we mentioned, our restaurants pivoted very quickly and they started doing takeout. We have other businesses who quickly were trying to move towards getting things online, and it could have been even advertising products on social media and allowing you to come and have pickups of products without actually coming into their store. So we are, just looking for ways that we can help businesses continue to grow and maintain their sales levels, even though your flow of traffic into your businesses may not be the same. Next slide. Well,
Something has happened to my.
okay.
Hold, please. There we go.
Okay. So recovery. You want to think about leveraging any new partnerships that you may have encountered during this time of a hazard, and think about the lessons that you have learned. And so I'll go back to my example about the promotions company that had the flood. One of the things that they did, and they had a great insurance agent, but one of the things that they did, obviously they called him and said, what is covered? What they found was that unfortunately they didn't have nearly enough coverage to take care of the damage that had occurred. So what it led them to was really sitting down with him and having an educational session on everything that was in their policy. And they sat down and they talked through a lot of possible hazards that could happen in their business to determine what additional coverage they really needed. And so I know that is an area that we're going to talk about throughout this session, but that is really something I encourage everybody to do, is reach out to your insurance agent and talk to them about different types of interruptions in business that could occur, and making sure that you are fully covered on that. One thing that they learned through this was, if we're going to package any type of products, whether it's inventory or maybe it's customer orders, we can no longer put those on the floor in a cardboard box. So they then invested in some bins, some on rollers, some that were plastic, that they had lids on. Another thing was just making sure that they had shelves that were up off the floor in case, anything like that happened again. Capitalizing on the expansion of your employee skills. So this is something that, in a lot of businesses, like I said, if you find that you have an interruption and you have an employee that all of a sudden develops coronavirus and is out, and they've been a key employee on a specific product line, or maybe a key employee in terms of processing orders, and all of a sudden they're out, you need to make sure that you are cross-training your employees, that you are, even in terms of marketing products, if you're in a retail setting, if you are typically the face of your business and you have a great relationship with your customers, you need to make sure that the person that fills in for you has that same type of personality and is capturing the same type of relationships when you are out. Okay? All right, next slide. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Margie Douglas with Southwest Community College, SBDC.
Good afternoon, everyone. I don't see any questions in our Q&A box, so I'll give you a couple of minutes to ask questions. If you have some, please type it in the Q&A. But, Cindy had mentioned the hazards of fire. Do you guys remember when we were young and we were taught that, God forbid, you got caught on fire, you should stop, drop, and roll? I'd like to think that we're doing that now. COVID-19 has basically stopped our world, and we've dropped to the floor to get into the position to roll or to carry on with business and life. The COVID-19 pandemic has challenged us to reevaluate just about everything. It is our goal to provide you with the tools to put out the fires that threaten your business. We appreciate you joining us today for our presentation and overview of developing a resiliency plan. This is, of course, the first session of a 13-week series of Refocus and Rebuild that is presented by the Small Business Development Center, by Virginia Community Capital, Gen Edge, Southwest Virginia Alliance for Manufacturing, and UVA WISE. Each participant should have already received a link to the templates for the Business Resiliency Plan, and you'll see those copies on the slide, so that you can reference those as we continue to discuss continuing business post-pandemic and while you're developing your own plan. Copies of today's slides will be sent to the participants, and you can download these templates at the URL that's listed on this slide. So moving forward, well, we do have a question that says, will we get a copy of the presentation? I think it just answered that, so thank you for that question. So moving forward, next Thursday, we will have another session on August the 13th, and we hope that you'll join us. We will have a session called How to Manage Debt Post-COVID-19. Mr. Mike Bandy, a certified public accountant, will be giving us valuable information relative to credit building and managing and cash flow management. So we hope that you will join us next Thursday, and we hope that you will contact us if you have questions as you move forward to build your resiliency plan. Again, I don't see any questions, so we hope that you will keep calm and small business on. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Marty. I'll just, and we, of course, like she said, we will provide these slides. We are also at the end have a couple different links to various information. This is not the resiliency guide. Tim.
Oh, we lost her.
Looks like she's frozen up. Mm-hmm. And so there will be a much more detailed template. And I know that that information is coming out to all of you all, and that will be provided, I think, each time that we are presenting. And that will really walk you through the process of developing this business resiliency plan. So next week again is Mike Bandy, and he will be talking about recovering from a financial standpoint. Any other questions?
I just want to say thank you to each of our Small Business Development Center folks, and Mandy, I hope you're seeing this later, but I really want to thank you for the time that you put this together and your expertise that you shared this afternoon. I also want to thank everyone that joined us and for taking the time out of your busy schedules to participate, and I hope that you're going to plan to join us over the next 12 weeks as we continue on this program. As it's been noted, we will be sending a copy of the PowerPoint slides, and we will be uploading the video to a site and provide that link. But over the next 12 weeks, please let us know how we can help you. Our objective is to help you as you recover from this pandemic, but also to grow your business. And I think over the next 12 weeks, each section is going to have something that's going to help you. It may not happen immediately, but I have a feeling that down the road, you're going to be happy that you participated in this. So, and if you saw somebody that wasn't, that you think that can have value from this, invite them to the next 12 sessions, and you can share the link when we send it to you. To receive the slides and the video. So I thank you for your time. And again, to my friends at the Small Business Development Center Network, thank you. And we'll see you next week. Mandy, we're finished.
Bye.
Bye.
You had a power outage.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.